I now ask Dr. Terry Dwyer to talk about the economics of Canberra Water and the proposed sewage recycling project.
Thank you, John. My topic tonight is what should clean, safe water cost? In giving this talk, I want to make it clear that I'm presenting my own opinions and not those of any institution or employer with whom I may be affiliated. I ask no one here to accept anything I say as fact. On the contrary, I invite you to make your own inquiries and come to your own opinions and conclusions. I would, of course, be grateful for any assistance in refining and extending data, since published sources do differ somewhat and the data is aggregated. It's sometimes very difficult to get clear information. I should also mention that I have no financial interest in ACT Water other than as a consumer, apart from some small dividends on AGL shares. I should also warn you that as an economist, and I am here as an economist, hopefully serving the public interest, I loathe monopoly. But as an investor, I love it, which may explain why water is now such an attractive asset class for merchant banks, private equity firms and governments seeking to extract more cash from your pockets. Well, what do we pay for water? We'll start with the first slide. Let's see what's happened to ACT water prices. They've skyrocketed since 1991. In 1991, the prepaid or free allowance was 455 kilolitres per household. By the way, now they say normal usage is 250. People must have got smaller or something. Anything over 455 was charged at 40 cents per kilolitre. Now, after ICRC's, the regulator, so-called Independent Regulatory Competition and Regulatory Commission's decision, from 1 July we will pay $1.33 for the first drop per kilolitre and $3.12 for every kilolitre over 300 kilolitres. This includes the government's so-called water abstraction charge of 55 cents, which is supposed to reflect water scarcity. And if you ask, why does the price rise from $1.33 to $3.12 if scarcity is already being charged for in the water abstraction tax, then you're asking a good question and should study economics. Anyway, if you use 455 kilolitres back in 1991, you pay $400. Now you pay $1,549, an increase of 287%. If you had a family or garden and used 950 kilolitres back in 1991, you paid $632.65. Now you pay $3,093.26, an increase of 389%. Now, I haven't seen a better hedge against inflation. And before we get guilty about not paying enough for water, I should mention that irrigators, such as rice farmers downstream, do pay a lot less. For permanent high security water downstream costs $2.20 per kilolitre, and that's equivalent to about 12 cents per kilolitre annually. Temporary water downstream costs about 21 cents per kilolitre. So ACT households are paying 16 to 30 times more than what irrigators are paying downstream, and by the way, nearly 1,000 times more than what a Queensland river licensee would pay. Partly the difference does reflect higher security and quality together with sewage and drainage, but by no means most of it. The increase in ACT water prices has delivered a big increase to ACT government revenue. What happens to the money? Well, no new dam has been built. In 2005-2006, ACTU earned a gross profit of $93 million on a revenue of $168 million. That's a very high slice coming out as profit. It paid $80 million as dividends and income tax to the ACT government, in addition to the water abstraction charge. Half of ACTU's revenue goes to the ACT government as taxes or dividends, so you can see that perhaps your household water and electricity bills may contain a large measure of disguised taxation. Not bad for the ACT government, considering that much of the water infrastructure was paid for when people paid their lease payments for the land as service blocks of land. Only a monopolist can make you pay twice for what you've already paid for. Well, leaving aside that, let's face the fundamental question, is water scarce in the ACT? And I think Charles has explained why in fact it isn't scarce. There is no scarcity of water in the ACT. ACTU's own Future Water Options project a couple of years ago, for which you were charged $5 million in your water bills, found that the ACT had enough water for 1 million people, even with the required environmental flows. Now, when supply exceeds demand, an economist will tell you the scarcity value should be nil. There is no scarcity. For example, air costs nothing to breathe, although like drinking water, it is essential to life and literally priceless. We know air is immensely valuable in use, but we don't pay for it. Why should we pay for an abundant supply of water if we've got more than enough? On average, 494 gigalitres is available annually from ACT catchments. Even after the very high environmental flow allocation of 272 gigalitres, Canberra and Queanbeyan only use a gross 65 gigalitres, less than 1/3 of the 222 gigalitres allocated for human use. 35 gigalitres of that is returned after being treated at the sewage treatment works, leaving an apparent net usage of 30 gigalitres a year. But even this net usage is necessarily overstated, as it takes no account of water returning to the rivers from houses, parks and gardens outside the sewer system, which is increased by urban runoff. In Canberra's case, urban areas are thought to produce an average of about 13 gigalitres, more runoff than previously rural environments, and that's a significant impact. So the net human usage of water in the ACT is on average about 17 gigalitres out of 494, which is 3.4%. So if you've been feeling guilty about using water, relax, you are not a sinner. So what's the problem? The problem is that the figures I just gave you are average figures. And as we know, rainfall in Australia is highly variable. Storage of water when rain does fall is the issue. To quote ACTU's 2005 Future Water Options project, the ACT is therefore water-rich relative to its population. It has enough water under ACT control to meet environmental requirements and to supply 1 million people. However, storage is currently limited. Storage is what is scarce and costs money, not the water itself. We've got plenty of it. We just have to find a way to store it.